Time's up, Admiral.
Here it comes.
Chevron 1, loaded.
For my ally is the Force, and the powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow.
You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Cry hammer, and let's set the tongues of war.
Chevron 2 is loaded.
Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, to hear the lamentation of your women.
It's all in the reflexes.
Well, also said you're heavy into martial arts, Tai Chi and all that killer stuff.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
Chevron 3 encoded.
And somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. I won't. The hell I will.
Chevron 4 encoded.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Chevron 5 encoded.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Chevron 6 encoded.
That's why you can't, monk boy.
Great Scott. Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
You shall not pass! I thought I'd die fighting side by side with Al.
What about side by side with a friend?
A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day.
Chevron 7 is locked.
I totally zoned out there for a second, and then I realized, oh, it's almost over. Pay attention. I was like, I'm just sitting there staring off the space. Like, wait, oh shit, it's over. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Saturday Night Driving, where we sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight some fine cinema. This is cinema. This is just a movie. This is cinema tonight. But first and foremost, Jed, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about this film. It's been a very long time since I saw it. I saw it once over a decade ago.
Wow.
But this is the first time I've watched it with a real critical eye that I've developed in the last few years in adulthood. And I appreciate it so much more than I ever could have before. So I'm very much looking forward to our discussion this evening.
Over 3 hours. And that's why I said this is cinema. Lawrence of Arabia is art. I mean, and also a cast, music, cinematography. Even when you feel like it's slow, it's still actually weaving part of the story in there, because this is history too. Some of it is, of course, embellished, but this is history. This is what happened in Arabia in World War I, when the British forces were fighting against the Turkish Empire, and they somehow corralled through T.E. Lawrence the Arab tribes to use them as essentially a bludgeon against them. So it's fascinating, and it's a pleasure to watch this. I watch this at least once. I think I watch this once a year, maybe once every other year. It's either biannually or annually, depends on my mood. But I try to watch this, and I try to not let too much time go between watchings. I think last time I watched this was 2023 is the last time I watched this right now. So it's been a couple of years since I last watched it. But oh man, it was great. It was fantastic. And hail and howdy to everybody across both the chats. We're happy to have you here on this Saturday evening, where I know you are sharing your precious time with us. We appreciate that. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channels, and let's get going. Lawrence of Arabia. Legata has already kindly put it up here. 1962, 3 hours and 38 minutes. But it doesn't really feel like
movie.
But it doesn't feel like it. Almost.
It does feel like that to me. I actually had to break it up. I watched it yesterday up to the intermission, then watched the rest of it today.
I started on Thursday and finished yesterday. So
It was a staple of the era to have very long films. The one that I remember the most is Ben-Hur with that intermission. That's a long movie as well. I love that film, the original. There's no new one. There's just the Charlton Heston version.
Yeah.
But I do believe it's a little bloated by modern standards, but by the standards of the 60s, it was completely normal. So it's kind of hard to judge it on its bloat to that extent. I do believe they should have cut some things out.
They could have.
It still makes sense. Like, it's hard to judge different rules for a different era.
I mean, I can see where it could be cut down. I mean, some of the desert traversing scenes could have shaved a few minutes off here and there. But you can't cut the scenes out entirely because every scene is a part of Lawrence's growth, fall, and then ascension to the mythical being that he was in there. And also the character study of him. It's fascinating. And you cannot go any farther without saying the performance by Sir Peter O'Toole is Peter O'Toole is one of my favorite actors. He is the lead in one of my very few 10 out of 10 movies. There is a Peter O'Toole starred movie where he is a 10 out of 10. He is the star. We'll get to it one day. I promise we'll get there. But he is fantastic. I don't want to say he steals every scene, but it's just such a powerful performance. Here's how incredible the cast is of this movie. You have 4 men in this movie that are leading men anchors and have gravitas to spare. You've got Sir Peter O'Toole. You have Sir Alec Guinness as Prince Faisal. Every scene he is in is just textbook acting. It's acting.
Which is surprising because he's not in the movie that much. He's in, maybe 4 scenes, I think?
I think if you total up his time in there, 20 to 30 minutes total, because those are long scenes.
Generous. Yeah.
They're long scenes, but he's in the movie in this 3 hours. He's only in it for a short amount of time, but it's Sir Alec Guinness. And when he's really acting, not just being Obi-Wan Kenobi for a paycheck, when he's actually doing it. Then you've got Omar Sharif as Sharif. I mean, and then you've got the venerable Anthony Quinn as I always mispronounce his name as Auda. Anthony Quinn. The thing about Anthony Quinn, though, that man is a Greek. He is of Greek origins. That prosthetic nose they got on his face. I love it.
There's a lot of things that would not fly these days.
It's 1962. They hadn't perfected practical makeup yet. You know, where you could literally transform somebody else. So it's just, hey, let's strap that.
It's not long after this, though. I put Planet of the Apes as like that's when Hollywood knew what they were doing. That was the moment that they figured it out, and that was close. Yeah, that was very soon after this, I believe. But yes, some of that makeup was rough, but some of the other makeup was incredible. I love the makeup on Lawrence near the end of the movie. Just to skip forward, when they attack that Turkish caravan, that just becomes a massacre. Just the blood covering him, the dirt, the crazy look in his eye.
Prisoners.
The makeup on that scene is incredible. Which some of the makeup isn't good though. For the first half of the movie, he's wearing the worst mascara I've ever seen. It's really bad.
But that's it. I think it's the worst mascara. So you're right. It's showing his transformation as just basically the desert file, the Anglo who loves the desert, but then becomes the desert, becomes a pseudo-Arabian, and makes actual true blood brother friends essentially among them, but then also wants nothing to do with it because of what it turned him into. Because they say it early on when the whole thing starts, he abhors violence. He doesn't like this and like that. But he eventually gives in also because the events change him. The events at the Turkish garrison.
He likes it. Well, too.
That's where I think true hate entered his heart. But when we get there, because I think the best way to go through this is scroll through the movie. I don't think there's any other way.
For the most part, yeah. It is a thick movie, so I imagine we'll go a couple minutes over.
Yeah. We're not gonna go on every single detail, guys. It's gonna be semi broad strokes.
Yeah.
But because you could spend 30 minutes literally on almost every powerful scene, breaking down the cinematography, breaking down the performances, the interactions. You just have to understand. So it
Be-
starts. Oh, go.
Before we jump into the movie, there is a one comparison that I want to make is
Mhm.
everyone who came to me and said it doesn't matter that Dune 1 and 2 have story issues. They're so beautiful, sweeping landscape, stuff like that. I just want to point them to this movie because yes, both Dunes have great landscape shots that are beautiful and whatnot, but they lack substance. That's the big problem I have with the Dunes is a lack of substance. It's still there. It's better than most of what we get today, but it's not to the level that people pretend it is. Those landscape shots are just there to be there. Whereas in Lawrence of Arabia, with technical masterpiece shots, like at
Mhm.
this era, some of the stuff was, at least as far as I'm aware, I'm not a history buff when it comes to cinema
Mhm.
or anything like that, but it comes across as some of this stuff was revolutionary, just the way that they filmed the movie as much as anything else. But the wide shots, the big cinematic landscapes, they informed character, they informed on plot. There was value to them beyond pretty image.
Mhm.
So no,
I mean,
I need those people to watch this movie.
this is 1962. Color is still relatively a new thing. It's only been
Hmm.
about a decade of color television, if even, and especially in the movies. So the fact that they reached this level of refined cinematography where you're getting these desert landscape shots. I think it's fair to say, even with this stellar cast, the desert itself is a character in this
Hmm.
because you get the many faces of the desert. You get the desert that is the rolling dunes. You get the desert that is hard as stone, that is just stone, that is unforgiving when they're crossing the anvil, when he's crossing Sinai, where it's more almost quicksand swampy with where he loses one of his servants. I mean, the desert is just it's a living, breathing creature. So when I got to pronounce Anthony Quinn's character's name, Auda. When Auda says later on, the desert has swallowed more blood
Hmm.
than you can possibly imagine. I mean, and that's the power of a great movie. Well, that's why a lot of people always say when they reference like Batman '89, they say that Gotham was its own was a character in the movie, has its own presence. This is where this kind of stuff originates, where they could take the scenery, the setting, and make it a living force that reminds you that is both beautiful and deadly. And because I think there's a line in it too. The desert, you can't. The desert was the rudderless ocean, or however they
Hmm.
said it. I get the
Yeah, it's
exact line.
the desert is an ocean you'd never dip an oar into or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like
that's it.
that.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's something that you cannot fight. You have to go with it. You have to let her lead you. You have to find her rhythm, and you can work in peace with her, but you can never really conquer her because she will swallow everything up. That kind of imagery is so powerful, and you at every scene where the desert is the enemy, because when they're making the trek to I want to say Agrabah, but I know it's
That's
not.
what I was saying the whole
I
time
wanna
too.
say just because of that.
Agaboda,
I
Agaboda.
yeah, close enough.
I'm
I'm
just gonna say
terrible
Agrabah.
historian.
When I say
Agrabah.
Agrabah, it means that city. We'll just go with
Uh,
that.
I, I, I'm sure they're going to correct us any second now. Both Algrim and Lagadas are going to correct us any second now in that. But when they're on the way there, listen, I'm a World War II historian, guys. I'm not a World War One historian. I don't know as much about World War One as I probably should. But Agaba, I think it's Agaba. I think it's Agaba.
Agaba.
I think it's Agaba. When they're on the way there, when they have to cross Akaba. There we
Aqaba.
go.
That's how you
Akaba.
pronounce it. Yeah.
There, Akaba. Okay, we were close. We're not in there, and that was phonetics, and there's the spelling. Algrim and Legatus both making us look like terrible hosts. Thanks, guys. Anyway, on the way to Akaba, the fact that they have to cross the anvil, and they have, what was it, 20 days,
Hmm.
no
Something
water
like
for the
that.
camels, and only water that they have on them for themselves. And that right there, the desert is the enemy. And it's like, you can't beat it. You could just outrun it because there's no escaping that sun. There's no clouds, there's no shade, just you, the sun, and the hard stone. And that's when you realize, at least for me, when you're watching this, because at that point, the desert had been a fascination thing for Lawrence. Like, oh, look at this. We're riding on the camels, these dunes. I'm sitting here running sand between my fingers. It's glorious. Oh no, now you have to survive for 20 days. And it's just that's how you tell a story. And this is, I want to say this now. This is how you tell a story from a historical perspective. Like this and Patton are fantastic historical representations of these periods of time in wartime. And that's why Patton is also one of my all-time favorites, one of my desert island movies. All right, so the movie begins begins at the end, honestly.
It does.
It begins at the end. Normally I'd hate it, but it's a historical movie. So
it's probably one of the points in the film that I have the most issue with. Partially because the crash scene does not age well. It's a little cringe, the crash scene on his little motorcycle.
The bicycles and they and 1962 stunt work, not what it is today.
Stunt work was a little bit different back then. But when I started the movie this time, I barely remember the movie. I thought that was going to be the staple of stunt work and action that we'd see through the movie. But there's a lot of great action set pieces in the desert. So I'm actually honestly surprised about how rough the motorcycle crash at the beginning of the film is. I don't know if it was maybe a different crew since it wasn't filmed. It was
in the normal way,
different time. Yeah, like I feel like there was something weird about that crash scene that was different people involved with a different level of talent and experience.
I think I think part of the weakness is when you see his goggles hanging on the bush. It's like an unnecessary tack.
How would that have happened? I don't know how that.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And at the same time, also, I think it would have been more powerful to see just part like his legs, his crumpled legs or something. That would have been a better shot. Like this might have been something that was shot at the very end. You know, one of the final shots. That because let's be honest,
it could have been a reshoot or something. Like maybe we need to do this.
Yeah, because you have listen, 95% of the movie shot in the desert. It takes place nowhere else but the desert or the pseudo desert, however they filmed it for Arabia. That's obviously shot in a nice, pleasant location. It's not the desert. So it's may have been a different team, a different this. And, maybe Sir Peter only wanted to do one take on the bike. And it's like, okay, we're not going to do much more of this. We're at the end of this. Let's wrap this up. Let's get it done. But it starts at the end of his story, where he gets in a motorcycle accident and everybody's going to his funeral and they're talking about, did you know him, this and that, understanding at that point he's Colonel Lawrence. He is essentially a living legend for what he did to rally the tribes of Arabia and help end the I would guess the Turkish front, the Arabian front in World War I, which from a war point of view is a war movie, because it's a war movie. War movie. As I said, I'm not a full-on war historian for World War I, of course, but I am well-versed enough in how it worked. The fact that you have the European front, which is trench warfare, which is literally a battle of inches, to suddenly realize that the other front between Arabia and Turkey, it was full-on warfare, the classic warfare that we understand, artillery, bombings, infantry moving about, mobile cavalry, all that kind of stuff. It's a fascinating concept, even where navies are in play because of controlling the Suez Canal and all that kind of stuff. So I really appreciate that they're showing us a World War I movie that isn't a trench warfare movie. I appreciate that as a war historian. I love that stuff. But and then we cut to the past, where we get the early Lawrence, who is would it be fair to call him a bit of an ideologue, or idealistic?
He's idealistic, yes, but there are other things about him where it really depicts his character arc. He goes on a massive character arc, but at the beginning, he's clumsy, he's awkward, he's rough around people. Like he does not know how to act around people. He even says, "Oh yeah, people, it's just my manner. People think I'm being rude all the time, but I'm not. I'm not trying to be rude." But he's still got that daredevil spirit that I really like. How they show with the matches. I was a little confused about the matches thing at first before his line about it, but he's a fascinating character that has ideas too big for his body, and I think that kind of shows his story. Is his ideas are too big for his flesh. And I mean, that kind of goes back to the classic, a man's reach exceeds its grasp. And I think Lawrence exemplifies that even at the beginning of the film.
Yeah, because he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room every time. It's obvious. And even though he may be, as you said, his social awkwardness instantly puts everybody at odds with him.
At least in
And
the British side of things.
yeah, and the funny thing is you go through the movie, even when he wants to fit in actively, he still can't later on because they accept him when he's victorious, but when he comes back after his second campaign, they see him as someone, and they actually use the term later on. They see him as somebody who's gone native. That he's, I mean, the line is, it's after his experience at the Turkish garrison, which I definitely want to talk about later. Says he's putting on a little bit thick, isn't he? Trying to be sociable, trying to be normal, trying to be more than he is, and you realize it is an act when you go one scene later when he's talking to was it Allenby? I think it's Allenby.
Allenby's the second
Allenby.
general.
Yeah, when he's talking to Allenby for the final push to Damascus. So you're absolutely right. Everything about him is awkward, and at first it's conscious because he's not trying, but then it's very conscious later on because he is trying, but he is so separate from the rest of the world. Because to your point, he as saying he's a guy who his reach exceeded his grasp. I think also it's an excellent story of absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Oh yeah, he's not necessarily a hero, and that's what's so fascinating about him is, yes, his legend has him as this great man, larger than life figure, but he absolutely got corrupted. There's a reason at the end of the film that both Prince Faisal and General Allenby want to get rid of him, because he's not the man that everyone believes him to be. He's broken, and no one sees that more than Sharif, who Sharif's character arc is fascinating too, especially with how they met. Lawrence and Sharif met. It's a great arc, but Sharif, who first thing we see him do is murder someone outright in cold blood without even thinking about it, to the end of the film, haunted by the man that Lawrence has become. I'm afraid to love him. Not in a gay way. If that came out today,
Sharif, played by Omar Sharif, it takes a fantastic actor to have that kind of character growth and travel, but then also to be able to emote that way. And even in the darkness of that scene when he's leaving for the last time he sees Lawrence, and he comes across Anthony Quinn, and it's brief, but you see he's crying. He's crying.
He's honestly one of the best actors in the film. I love Sir Alec Guinness, but I put Sharif right next to Lawrence.
Oh yes, of course. I mean, I hail Sir Alec's performance, but he is essentially a side character.
Absolutely.
Prince Faiz is a side character, but Sharif is he plays off of Lawrence, and it's a duality almost. One man who had this vision of Arabia, but that vision ends up breaking him, and another man who never had that vision, but is now willing to take it on to try and see it to a proper end instead of the chaotic one that Lawrence ended up creating. And Omar Sharif is also, he's a fantastic. I mean, we've seen Omar Sharif when we did 13 Warriors. I mean, he was in the beginning. He played with the beginning. Now, I mean, the guy had a venerable career. Fantastic actor. I mean, that's why I love this cast. I have no criticisms of anybody's performance in this movie. I could say that right now. Nobody lit up at all in their performances. It was just boom, boom, boom. Every delivery, every line, every exchange, every expression. I mean, Peter O'Toole, that it is a master class in facial emoting, what he goes through from the time, sometimes the horror, sometimes the glee, the zealous rage he shows at the end, the personal shock and awe. It's fantastic. And back to what you said, how everybody's afraid of him. One of the best lines is after the massacre, when they come across the Turkish infantry retreating, the reporter that have been documenting says, "You hateful man, you hateful, hateful man." Oh,
do you think I at first thought he was talking to Sharif because I wasn't looking properly, but just Sharif's acting in that moment was incredible too. It's like only an Arab would do this, right? It's very pointed dialogue.
But he's looking right at Lawrence, because then he says, "You want me to take that picture? I know you love it when I take your picture, you hateful man." it just is so impactful. But that's the end. Let's keep back to the beginning. This is, I believe it was, I forget the year it's taking place in. It must be at least 16 or 17, because the
Yeah,
Americans
I'd
haven't entered
imagine so.
the Americans haven't entered the war yet.
Mhm.
So the British are having trouble fighting the Turks because they have no way to put pressure on them from the Arabian side, because the Arabian
Yeah, not through
tribes,
the desert.
yeah, they're tribes. They hate each other. They're happy to war with each other. Some of them, like Audi's tribe, they're mercs. They're operating as mercs for the Turks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that rhymed.
Mercs for the Turks.
Mercs for the Turks. They're operating as mercs for the Turks, and so there's no real loyal to each other. And like you said, we get introduced to Sharif right away. He murders a guy for drinking out of his well. Just poof, shoots him dead. And that is an interesting thing, because just to cut right to that, basically they want to send Lawrence out there just to kind of put somebody out there to get a feel of the situation with Prince Faisal and all that stuff. And Lawrence has his big ideas on how to get an army together, and he figures if he gets out there and talks to them and convinces them, I think that's the nicest way to put it, he tricks them in a way. He tricks them a lot, and he wants to. Well, I think I already said it. He falls in love with the desert. They say, I mean, Sharif's commentary, "You're one of these English who love the desert," and he says, "No man loves the desert. You deal with the desert. You cope with the desert. We don't love it. It's horrible. It's horrible. And we have no water. We don't want to live here. We want to live in lush green places where we can grow food, not this horrible thing." And then Lawrence replies, "But it's so beautiful. It's graceful. It's isn't that?" And it's the beginning. It's the beginning. So he gets sent out there. He gets a guide, and the guide, he. I think this to study Lawrence's character going from here on out. Lawrence has the open personality of just trying to be friends with everybody. He treat respect. I think it could definitely say Lawrence in the beginning wants to treat everybody with respect. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And I think it shows how good of a leader he's going to be eventually, because that guide, I got the impression that the guide had originally intended to leave him when the territory changes. He does not want to go into Harith territory.
I think it's and I had it yesterday.
There's so many
Howitad.
There's so many tribe names, but he does not want to go into that territory. But because of how kind Lawrence is to him, how respectful, giving him the pistol, I at least got the impression, this might be headcanon, that he chose to continue guiding him because of the man Lawrence was, to see this great man in action.
It's the first example of his ability to connect and how he wants to learn. The openness of it, like the showing the respect for the culture, and then the guy responds. Go ahead.
Well, I think the respect for the culture is one of the most important things, because he sees Arabia unlike anybody else in the British Army at the time, because the British Army, a lot of them aren't as educated as Lawrence. We know for a fact Lawrence is incredibly well educated despite his bastardous birth. He knows what Arabia used to be. Hundreds of years before this, Arabia and the Middle East was the center of all learning and knowledge in the entire world. We still use Arabic numbers to this day. And there was a point where like Damascus and Baghdad were the wisest centers of human knowledge, or at least up there as one of the most intelligent people, one of the greatest people. It was a very, very long time ago, but Lawrence can still see the potential of this people to be that way again. Whereas the British Army only sees the scattered tribes that they see before them. He can see the potential to return who they used to be. And I think that's what fuels him, rebuilding Arabia.
Romanticism.
Very much romanticized.
Yeah. And it's a fascinating picture you paint, where we talk about their past, where they had all this knowledge and power, and now they're frightened of technology and they don't understand it. Because when he arrives, after Sharif takes over as his guide, begrudgingly, and they form their initial rocky friendship, their connection begins there. When they arrive at Faisal's camp, it's under attack. And that British officer who we'd seen in the beginning, the colonel who was the first liaison between the British Army and Faisal's army, basically keeps saying they do not understand the range of modern weapons. We told them not to put their camps so close where the planes can reach them, where the artillery can reach them. And now it's a great example of how locked in their ancient society they are. How they didn't evolve. They didn't. Well, I don't. Maybe evolve is not the word. They didn't advance because the desert does not permit for that kind of technological growth.
Well,
I mean, yes,
at the very end of the movie, when they do take Damascus, there's that one guy who says, "What do we need with electricity? What is the point of telephones? We don't need any of this."
yeah,
It's a very I don't know what the right term to say on YouTube
Yeah.
is, but it's very much not an advancing perspective. It's not a progressive, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
mindset, which can get you left behind. Yes, you want to balance progressivism from what it meant in that context, not in the context, not in the modern political sense, but you need to balance that. These people were refusing to, and to a certain extent, they couldn't because of the way that their society was set up tribally. They had to look out for their own. So
Yeah.
it makes sense, but it's so sad. And I think that's what Lawrence took away from it too, is this romantic dream of what Arabia used to be slips away from him because he realizes it's impossible. It really is impossible.
Because blood feuds, even to the very end, when they've conquered Damascus, Auda and Sharif are ready to go to blows because one's insulted the other or perceived insult. It's very hard to get over a tribal society that latches onto blood feuds. It's just it was a different part of the world, and that's why the British liaison, the colonel that's there at first, he's having such a hard time trying to explain to them, no, we can't give you artillery. We can train you this, but no, we can't give you that. Do you understand? We're trying to make you better. But even Faisal says, but you don't understand. They're not gonna accept it. I mean, Faisal is an educated man. He's well versed in politics. He's well versed in the West. He understands this stuff. Even though he doesn't understand a lot of terminology, he understands how the world works because of his position as prince. And that's thunder. Wow. You guys don't hear that, do you? Okay. It got through the sound dampening of the headphones. That's how I noticed it. Damn. Anyway, I hope my power doesn't go out. This place can be finicky. If I drop away, that's why I'm suddenly gone. But Faisal understands it, and as soon as he arrives, Lawrence arrives and meets Faisal, the delicate dance begins of Faisal instantly realizing to your final thoughts on their final interactions. I have the words, I can use them, I swear. He knows he's dealing with a man who can do incredible things, but may also do as much damage as success. Because there's a line later on.
We're doing a very good job at following this movie.
I'm doing the best I can.
I can't do it either. Yeah, I wasn't directed at you.
I know, because we have to follow some of their logic, because it's about the scenes. Like, we're going from one Faisal scene to another. When Lawrence has his army, Faisal's army, who's in command of it, and they're out there roaming the wastes, and they don't know where they are. He's talking with, I think it's Allenby. I think he's talking with Al, or maybe somebody else. No, it wasn't. No. It was somebody else. Either way, he's talking with somebody else. I don't remember who at the moment. No, it was the reporter. The reporter. He's talking with the reporter when the reporter first gets introduced, and he's trying to figure out where Lawrence and the army are. And he's saying, out here in these lands, the most respected man is the man who brings victory. And Lawrence has done nothing since he appeared at Faisal's camp and said, give me these 50 guys. We're going to cross the hammer. We're across the anvil, and we're going to get to Aqaba, and I'm going to recruit Audi's clan. We're going to recruit these guys, and we're going to take Aqaba from the undefended land side, because all the guns are pointing at the sea. And once he wins that victory and then survives a trip through Sinai, that's victory. And that is what that's the beginning of legend. And we're talking about, and I'm not trying to be culturally disrespectful at the time, but we're talking about a peoples who respect victorious violence. that was the culture back then. You win violently, you get praised. And we saw it when we get introduced to Faisal's courtier, one of his dudes. Or it's kind of the running line in the beginning. Things are fated. It was fated. It was fated. It was going to be. It was going to be. That's their perspective on life. That this is how it's going to happen. It was supposed to happen. And part of Lawrence's first early character development or pushback is nothing's written. We make our own destiny, and that was why he became a figure to them. Because to them, even for him, it was team free will. And I'm making this happen. But to them, they still saw it as this dude was just, he was going to do this. So we have to follow behind him because he's going to do great things. And it's fascinating. So for the sake of the fact we're jumping around, after the anvil trip, we already talked about it. And even during the trip of the anvil, when he goes back to save the dude who fell off the camel, which is important. You would think, why are we watching this scene? Why are we wasting time with this scene? If you're watching it for the first time, thinking, man, why are we waiting for him to do this? If you feel like you could cut this scene out. Why do we need this? Oh, he's just going to rescue a guy. Couldn't we have gotten all the way back later that it just happened? No.
One of the most important.
You have to see it. You have to understand what he goes through, because this is a guy who first liked him a lot, but then became super loyal to him, and his life was in his hands. And then, not literally, but 5 minutes later, once they've got Audi's clan in line, they're going to go do this. There's an incident in camp, and suddenly it's like Aqaba's right there. They're going to take Aqaba. They're going to do it. It's going to be awesome. Oh no, we're all about to kill each other because of blood feuds. But suddenly Lawrence says, "Hey, wait! I have no feud with anybody. If I perform the execution, I do that. Are we good?" Yeah, sure. That's fine. All right, fine. And it's the dude he saves, Jed. How powerful is that he has to now execute this man? And then later on, the line we learn is so powerful. I mean, it's wow.
It's an incredibly well acted scene from everybody else, and he's trying to be in that scene. I feel like he's trying to be Solomon, the classic cut a baby in half thing. That's what he thinks he's doing. But the moment he sees the face of the man that he drug out of the sun's anvil, clinging onto life, which made him a legend to the Arabs, which got him his robes and got them to accept him to that extent, was the man kneeling before him, ready to be executed. And it's kind of a weird expression that the guy has too. It's not anger, it's not resentment. That guy is very much accepting death. So he does try to dodge or whatever. Like he does hit the ground right before Lawrence shoots, but it's still, the expression is very powerful from that guy. And what I took out of it is maybe he agreed with the rest of the Arabs to say that his death was written. And so he was very much okay with Lawrence killing him now, because it's restoring the natural order, going back to how the world should work. And it made so much sense to him that Lawrence was the one to kill him. He wanted to die.
Yeah. And on top of that, Lawrence basically held his soul. That's what I say. It's like his life was in his hands because he pulled it from the fire, essentially. So, like you said, that's a look of acceptance. It's like, yeah, I know. I don't regret what I did. My life, you gave me my life, therefore it's yours, take away. And the thing about it is this: he kills him. He shoots him a couple times, if I'm right.
He empties the revolver.
Yeah. And later on, when questioned about this type of thing, connected to future things, Lawrence says, I liked doing this. I liked the power that I had over this.
That was the first time he felt like the god or the prophet that he put himself up as more than anything else.
Yeah. And it's just that's where he begins to crack. Because right there, suddenly he begins to drink his own Kool-Aid at that moment. It's not so much, I'm not doing this because I want to try and win. No, suddenly now I'm doing this because I think I'm great. Even though Audi tries to tell him when to cross Sinai, goes, I'm going to cross Sinai. You can't do it. No one can do it. Moses did it. Moses was beloved by God and a prophet. I mean, he's already putting himself on that level.
I do
Moses
love that it took him a few days to cross the same desert that took Moses 40 years.
hey, God makes sure he was lost. Okay, God purposely kept them wandering like that. It was punishment. Anyway, and then he goes through Sinai, and we're moving towards the intermission. We're almost at intermission now. We're like an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes into this movie, almost 2 hours into this movie.
Yeah, it's pretty far in.
And even though you don't feel like a lot has happened, it's just all this character play, all this work, all this building. And he gets through Sinai. He loses one of his servants, which that's a whole little side arc. These guys, he levels up, he raises them up from their poverty and gives them purpose because they worship him. And that's nice. If we had more time and maybe another guest, we could go over that. But we're gonna push forward. He gets to Cairo.
Mm-hmm.
And he learns that things are different. We got Allenby's in charge of the previous general, who was a complete dick, is gone. Allenby, who was a smart man, a clever man, even though he says he's not clever, he's very clever because Allenby knows how to play this game. He knows he's got a very powerful weapon in Lawrence. He also knows it's a dangerous weapon. To later on quote, at the end of the movie when Faisal says, "We both know that Lawrence is a double-edged sword," and that's a fascinating line from an Arab who uses scimitars.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's why that line to me is so potent when Faisal says that later on, is because that's a culture that believes in a single-edged blade. But he's saying this is a double-edged blade, and it's deadly no matter where you swing it. I love good writing like that. And a delivery from Alec Guinness is just, it's awesome. But Allenby knows all of this stuff. And when Lawrence comes in and he's brought in, and everybody sees him coming in his tattered robes, and the kid is near death, and it's like, we want lemonade and all that stuff. That's just great performance work. But then Allenby sits him down. It's like, okay, what do you want? I need this, I need that, I need money, I need all this stuff, because he had tricked Audi to getting Aqaba. He said there's a giant chest of gold there. There's no gold. There was no gold. There was never any gold. But I'll bring you gold if I go to Sinai. If I go back to Cairo through Sinai. And he says, I need artillery. Give them artillery. Maybe. That's one of the biggest things, because then Dryden says, you give them artillery, you give them independence. And we can't have that.
Which is an interesting discussion to have around the artillery, because when that first happens, we're kind of on Lawrence's side as the audience. We're like, give him what he wants. Allenby needs to give him what he wants. And Allenby's not a villain or anything, or portrayed as a villain, but
I'm a soldier.
He's portrayed in the wrong in that moment, at least to the audience.
Yeah.
But by the end of the film, once you see what Lawrence has become, it's probably good he didn't have access to artillery.
Exactly. And even all that. That's why I said Allenby is clever, because when they arrive in Damascus at the end and they see the chaos and the madness,
he just waits.
It's because he's a clever man. He knows what's gonna. He knows that Lawrence will not be able to hold together what's there. Once Faisal arrives, things will change, because Faisal is happy to play politician, even though he knows, I forget what the agreement was called. He still knows he'll get what he wants eventually. But until he gets there, Allenby knows, we're not gonna entertain this Arabian Republic that's there, because it's just a bunch of shouting men who, as we will see later on in that moment, have no idea what it means to control the city they've taken. They can't run anything. They can't fix anything. They can't take care of their wounded. They can't take care of their prisoners of war. That hospital scene, when that, I guess I'm going to assume it's a captain. I don't know British World War I. I guess rank epaulets, rank designations. I don't know them that well. When that captain comes in while Lawrence is touring the Turkish hospital and goes outrageous and slaps him, and then 5 minutes later shakes his hand as though he didn't know he had met him before. It was disgusting. It was horrible. But that was the truth. The Arabs had no idea how to rule or rule themselves or control themselves or do anything. And everybody...
I think that's the moment that broke Lawrence. Like,
it is.
That's when his dream was dead. Before that, it was chaos, but he still believed he could give the Arabs Damascus.
No, you can't do it, because, and I say this not to be uh not to be I guess insensitive,
Mhm.
but they were not a civilized people. They were not a modern civilized people. They did not know how early 20th century technology or anything worked. They just didn't. So there's no way they could run a full-on capital city like Damascus, which is powered by massive generators, has a sewer system, an aqueduct that needs to be monitored so the water works. When he's trying to turn that water on for that dude in the hospital, it's just not turning on, and the faucet's literally breaking in his hands. They just don't know. They don't know how to run telephones. They don't know how to do anything. I mean, you
Well,
have Sharif who's going to learn, but that's
mhm. I want to mention that scene real quick too. When he's trying to fill up the water and visiting the hospital, whatnot, he has his scarf or whatever it's called over his face,
yeah.
so we don't get to see his facial expressions. Yet he still knows how to act. Not even just his eyes, his body language. Like even in the scenes where his back is turned to you,
Mhm.
you can see this man losing hope. Everything that he stood for the last few years, everything that he is and was, is shattered to the point. This is the moment he never wants to see the desert again. This is the point where
Mhm.
he's going to accept the recall to home. This is when he was broken.
Mhm.
And you don't need a single line of dialogue to understand that.
And that's why Sir Peter O'Toole was one of the masters of his craft at the time. Outstanding actor. He was an actor that could be anything on the screen. He could become. He's one of those guys that could become the character, and it's a fabulous performance. And but that's the end. We back to where we are when he wins, or I guess in his mind wins Allenby's support. But in fact, Allenby's already making sure that he's not going to get everything he needs. He now will go off through the intermission to lead Faisal's army. And then when we get to that point, people keep saying Lawrence's army, and Faisal goes, "My army, commanded by Lawrence." And that's the moment during his second campaign, because I guess we call Aqaba the first campaign. So his second
Mhm.
campaign, where he's got a couple of thousand troops that continually whittles away because of the tribal aspects. They get what they want and they leave. And then maybe they'll come back next season. And we get through all these things, and there's that attack on the train when the reporter has reached Lawrence's forces, and he's recording it now, and they're sacking that first train. Lawrence is on the fence still. At that one point, he still abhors the ultra violence, the continual pummeling. Because at one point, they've got their modern weaponry, they've got automatic machine guns,
Mhm.
and they're pummeling that train long after it's defeated. The Arabs just keep shooting, and Lawrence has to tell them to stop, stop, stop. But then, where they're looting it, here comes Lawrence walking around checking this out, and there's this one Turkish soldier left alive, in blackface, no less in blackface, and he gets the drop on Lawrence, and he wings him in the shoulder or the arm. So it was on the tricep,
Yeah.
tricep area.
It was barely a flesh wound.
Yeah, but it's surprise, knocked him down. But then
Mhm.
Lawrence gets up, and he just stands there. And the guy, and now, if this were a more modern day film, we're going, "Oh man, how's that guy miss? How's that guy miss?" First of all, that dude is in complete shell shock. Essentially,
He had a train blow up around him. It's a miracle he's alive.
yeah,
His
he
legs are
is.
probably pummeled.
He has no ability to aim, so it's a miracle he got that wing shot. So
Mhm.
it makes sense that he's not hitting because of the trauma he's just suffered. But Lawrence stands there thinking, and you can see it in his eyes, "I'm untouchable.
Mhm.
I am."
And that's when he starts talking like a god. Even
Mhm.
the scene after that with like, "Oh, they need a golden bullet to kill me."
Yeah,
That I 100% agree with you. That's when he started to realize he was more than any man, or at least believed he's more than any man. And I think that prior to the Turkish soldier unloading his pistol at him, if it had just been 30 seconds previously, he might have tried to convince what's his bucket, Audi, not to kill him with his sword. But
No,
in that moment,
his eyes move. He sees him. He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna let it happen." Gonna let it happen.
that's when the god complex starts, the
Yeah,
goddess. You're right. And I do believe if that had happened, if the Turkish soldier hadn't shot at him one more time, he would have tried to save the Turkish soldier's life.
yeah. Let's not go too far. And that's the moment. From this point forward, Lawrence always goes too far, and suddenly Sharif, who had been all for going too far sometimes, now he becomes the one that says, let's not go too far. Let's not become the barbarians they think we are out here. Let us show mercy. But Lawrence, as you said, and as a God's plan, now he's got the God complex. He thinks Utopia. He thinks a golden bullet. They keep saying, will they come back? They'll come back for me. They'll come back for me. Not because for their country. What happened to Arabia? No, they're coming back for me. What happened to Faisal? No, they're coming back for me. And he starts buying into it. And they keep losing forces. They keep losing troops to the point where they've only got 20 left, maybe 50. And the whole deal had been, we're going to get here while Allenby gets Jerusalem. And the ultimate arrogance of Lawrence. I don't remember the name of the city where the Turkish garrison was at this point. I'm sure, again, the Algrim or Legatus will add it, will give it to us when they go north. When it's, I mean, got to remember, just because they're in the desert, Arabia is a very large swath of the world. And you go far up enough, there will be snow. It's winter. And it's cold.
There are mountains.
Yeah. Yeah. So they get all the way up there. And now it's, how are we going to take the city? And Lawrence has no plan. He thinks he's going to walk in there, announce he says, I'm looking for a way to announce my presence. Man, he's kind of off his rocker right now. And he goes in there with Sharif thinking, I'm going to pass for an Arab. And magically he does, because he convinces them he's got certain, I guess, genetic traits from where his father and mother were, or whatever. He managed to pull it off, but he gets captured by some Turkish soldiers. And he catches the eye of Jose Ferrer, the great Jose Ferrer. He catches his eye, who's playing the Turkish commander. And right away, and I've caught this every time I watch it, that Turkish commander had other ideas for the fair-skinned Lawrence.
Yeah, that was definitely a sexual scene, which surprised me for 1962.
Yeah. Dara, thank you, Algrim. Dara. And that leads to things. So when he's captured, they strip him naked because he defies them. He's going to get beaten. And I've always had this thought, and I've never really had a chance to discuss it like this situation. I think more happened in there than just torture.
It would make sense with how broken he is afterwards.
Exactly.
Like, before that scene, he thinks he's invisible. Like, he thinks he has supernatural abilities. Genuinely, I believe he thinks he's superhuman at this point.
Yeah.
And then we see him whipped on the back a couple times. Even when we see him back in Cairo, he's just got, the cut on his lip and bleeding through the back from a couple lashes. Like, that's not enough, especially in comparison to the talks of what Turkish soldiers do to their prisoners. We must kill all our wounded so they will not become prisoners. Something else must have happened. I fully agree with you there that it
also
was... Oh yeah, that it was much more than a couple lashes that he endured there. I think there's definitely some suggestive.
We saw it. We saw it. The suggestive. He that close up when the Turkish commander smiles, almost licks his lips, and his noted coughing, and then while the torture is going on, you hear the coughing. You cut. He's looking through the door, partially undressed. He started to undress. I think once Lawrence was beaten, I think he got assaulted.
I think so too.
I think he had his way with him, to be, delicate. Use the words that YouTube doesn't like us to use. And because when he comes out, when Sharif picks him up out of the mud, that's not the look of a man who only got tortured.
No.
That's he's dead inside there for a little bit.
He doesn't speak for at least days. I'm guessing weeks. He has to be force-fed, forced to sleep. Something incredibly traumatic happened, and I feel like that would qualify because you don't get it initially after he's arrested. The implication is that they just saw a white dude and thought maybe this is Lawrence or maybe this is a British spy or something. That's the impression we get. But then we see the lineup of the fair-skinned men. This wasn't a military operation. This was a fetish hunt.
Oh, good way to put it. Excellent way to put it. That's great. This was feeding the fetish designs of the Turkish commander, who is at this point is knowing that he's probably gonna be conquered soon, because the Turks are losing the war at this point on their front. They're losing, so he knows that the city's going to be taken, if not by the
So
Arab
why
army, but
not
by the
enjoy
British.
his last months?
Yeah, I'm gonna do what I want. Who's gonna stop me? So
Oh, and
Lawrence,
his guards were definitely into it too. The
oh,
guy pulling on Lawrence's arms in the front,
creepy
he
smile.
was very creepy. He was into
Yeah,
it.
yeah, he was totally into it.
I'm
So,
glad I'm not the only one who thought there was
oh no, I've thought this
some
forever.
sauce.
Every time I watch him,
Yeah.
I go, man, yeah, he got that starfish parted, is what happened there. And yeah, I said it. Guys,
Okay, Jeremy.
for the look alone on your face, that was worth it.
It's a very Jeremy thing to say, man.
I know, but hey, it's me. I'm gonna push the line, push the envelope. Anyway, so now Lawrence says, I'm done. I'm going home. We're done. And he goes back, and we talked about this before. He comes back, and he's now consciously being awkward, because he's trying to fit in with the British officers again.
He's
and they're
trying to
not
fall
having
back
it.
to his old patterns.
And they're
it's
not
forced.
having it. It's forced. They say, well, they allow him to put a little thick. And before he can even have a chance to try and reintegrate, Allenby wants to see him. Says, okay, we're gonna take Damascus. I need the Arab army. And Lawrence puts on quite a show. I can't do this. Well, give me whatever you want. Okay, I'll do it. Because then I think it's now you have the combination of his God complex, but also now there is true hate in his heart.
So you think that was all an act?
I don't think it was an act so
Everything
much
in
as
Jerusalem. Because I got the impression that he really was broken, and then he changed his mind.
No, I think he was broken
with Allenby.
No, I think
I
think he was broken.
Allenby convinced him to go back to war.
I think it's a combination. I think he was broken, and Allenby starts feeding him his Kool-Aid again and hyping him up. You're the only man that can do this. You're the one who has to do this. They're going to listen to you. And it reignites his self-important fire, his God complex fire. Problem is, though, it's not just his belief in his abilities and his stance as I'm this legendary figure. Now there's hate. He really hates the Turks now, and he wants vengeance. He wants complete and total vengeance, and that's why when we now skip to
before we skip, unless there's a better explanation for that scene, that is one of the two scenes in the film that I took the most issue with. The one previously being his motorcycle accident at the beginning.
Okay.
Lawrence's heel turn in that scene with Allenby from no, just please, I'm done. I don't want to see the desert again. Please, I'm not
special. I'm not special. You're special.
Give me an ordinary job, a job any man can do. Which all that makes sense, especially with the conversation he had with Sharif before he left. Mm-hmm. But then suddenly he's like, I will go back. I will give them Damascus. And I think that heel turn is just too fast, unless it was all a ruse, but I don't see that.
I think it was cognitive dissonance. And he was working so hard to convince himself because of what happened to him in Dara that he couldn't do it. But then when somebody starts feeding his ego, he didn't need a lot of pushing to do it. That's how I look at it. He didn't need a very big push. And then suddenly, okay, okay, all right, fine. I am special. I am the one. They're all going to come back for me. Let's do this. And we get to the beginning of the Arab army. We get to the generals or Allenby and his command staff talking about their push to Damascus. And they go, where's that Arab army there? Oh, they're just out there and they're moving. Don't worry. There's several thousand of them. They'll be there. They're probably going to, because Lawrence says, I'm going to beat you there. Like you said, I'm going to beat you there. I'm going to give them Damascus and you're not going to get it back. And that's when Allenby realizes, okay, I'm going to play this differently in the end game here, I think. Because they get there, and now this is the ultimate change of Lawrence, as we already referred to earlier. He gets there, and as he's coming in, the reporter's talking to Sharif, says, have you spoken to Lawrence as he got back? He goes, yes. Has he changed? No, he's the same. And that's, you could see it on Sharif's face. He knows this is not the same man. His friend is not the same anymore. And as he's marching in, and he's got his bodyguards, the cutthroats, the mercenaries, and he just blows by Audi. I was like, Lawrence, orange. Blows right by him. It's like, sorry, I don't got time for you. I don't got time for you anymore. And that's the thing. I don't think at that point Lawrence trusts anybody anymore. His faith is broken, and he has no faith. And we now get the reports of that there's the broken Turkish column that's in retreat from the British forces. They're going to run smack dab into the Arab army, and they see them. The Turks are broken. They're carrying their wounded. They got nothing in this village. And what they see there is the village of one of these dudes who was there, one of the Arabs, head Arab guys, I guess they knew. He had a name, I don't remember. And the Arab, whose home it was, mounts up, pulls out his scimitar, and just charges, knowing he's probably going to get shut down, but that was his home, his village. And Sharif is going, Lawrence, we can't do this. Go around them, because Sharif knows what's about to happen. He knows his culture. And he knows that Lawrence he's changed, that he's not the guy who was going to try and not do as much violence as possible. But then when the dude gets shot, and one of Lawrence's bodyguards, who Sharif has already criticized, these are murderers, these are criminals, he's going, no prisoners. No prisoners. And then everybody's hyped up, and then Lawrence just goes, no, and the famous line, no prisoners. No prisoners, and they just go. And there are several action set pieces in this movie. They're not grand, epic action set pieces, but they don't need to be.
They're dirty. They're personal. They're very personal.
And
it's hard.
And this one is gloriously despicable.
I think it's the greatest sequence in the movie.
Oh, it's fantastic. No,
absolutely my favorite sequence. No, I know what you mean. I'm just agreeing with you. Is that it's just incredible.
Watching them just slaughter the Turks. It's a slaughter. So a few die in the initial charge, but once the Arab army, once that cavalry, because it's an army of cavalry, once they're in there, it's just a massacre. And Lawrence is a man possessed. He empties his revolver, keeps rolling in, and you realize a certain amount of time has gone by. Because when Sharif catches up to him at one point, his entire bandolier of bullets is empty.
Mm-hmm.
He has reloaded multiple times. Boom, boom, boom. And he ditches his revolver, pulls out the knife, which was a gift from Sharif.
It's a ceremonial weapon, it looks like.
It was a gift. And he just wades at the battle. And by the time it's done, and I know this is what you were talking about earlier, how grotesque it is and how he's transformed. When Sharif finds him at the end of the battle, it's beautiful cinematography. The dust, the smoke, the litter, the burned out husks of the villains, the bodies. He finds Lawrence leaning up against the remains of a shack, covered in blood. He's been using that dagger. No more guns. He was up close and personal. Just. And that's the performance of Peter O'Toole, the expression that Peter O'Toole mustered on his face, the combination shock and awe and partial revelry in giving into his hate like that. It's fantastic. And then we get the line when the reporter comes up, you hateful man, you hateful, because the reporter realizes that Lawrence allowed this to happen.
He contributed to a large degree. And I think that means so much to him specifically because he's the man who made Lawrence a legend in the West. Like, yeah, he was already a legend in Arabia because of his actions, but he became known in America and England and whatnot because of this reporter. And it was all a lie, at least from the reporter's perspective. He's like, I looked for a hero, a great man to lead America into war, and I chose a monster. Like it's his life's work shattered in front of him. That's a broken spirit. He's broken just like Lawrence is, to a different extent, of course. But I love how we get virtually no dialogue between no prisoners and the reporter coming in.
And the only dialogue you get is Sharif going, "Oh God, oh God."
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, oof. It's fantastic.
It's a very powerful sequence. I think we would have lost something if at least that sequence, probably most of the movie, but if that sequence had been made today, because modern filmmakers would have made a half CGI, made a grandiose battle, you
Mhm.
get so lost in the spectacle that you don't see the character. I think
Yeah.
we needed the technology of the era to just get right up into Lawrence's face and see the personal carnage. It is up close.
He,
It's violent.
his soul's been ripped to shreds at that point.
And it
He
makes a lot more sense if he was assaulted by the Turkish dude. That
Yeah.
explains why he's so broken.
And why that's why we said that's why this makes sense that he would unleash this kind of terror and horror upon this battlefield. But we're moving all restraints from the Arabs and letting slaughter every Turk there because no prisoners. No prisoners. And then they take Damascus. They take Damascus, and as we talked about it before, Allenby arrives there and he realizes pretty quickly, yeah, this is gonna fall apart in a matter of days. We're gonna we've delayed Faisal so that then we can resume control and have this go our way. And we watch it all fall apart for Lawrence. He tries to have them do this, tries to have them do that, and it just doesn't work. Just doesn't work because you're dealing with a peoples who didn't who I don't think even wanted a country.
No, I don't think genuinely.
They didn't want a country. They just wanted to be left to their tribal ways and their ancient grievances and their ancient designs. And you reach this point here as Lawrence tries to tell them, "Oh, but if we accept anything from them, they'll have the control over you." But these people weren't designed or trained at that time to run a city, to run the modern technology of the early 20th century. And you realize, and it's a fascinating moment at that point to watch the intricacies of European politics assert itself on Arabia. How we're going to divide it here, we're going to divide it there. We came up with our agreements here. How we're going to treat this, that,
Yep.
there.
Incompatible systems.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a fan. That's why I love these types of historical movies because I love to see the stuff about how this is how it was.
Yeah, it's not sugarcoating it. It's not trying to romanticize it as Lawrence saw the past.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it mainly because of the third act, but especially because of the Damascus bit at the very end. I see this as being very similar to a lot of Shakespearean tragedies because I think this movie is a tragedy.
Oh,
not just because he dies at the beginning, but because it's all a lie. The man he was is a lie. Like I see very Macbethian characters. That's one thing that I love about Shakespeare's tragedies is even the most vile, despicable people at the end of the story, they started out as good, or at least perceivably good from the audience perspective. That's what makes it tragic, not the death, not the deeds, but the fall from grace.
Yeah.
And I definitely see that in Lawrence.
Yeah, I mean, this is a man who started out an ideologue, who or not. I said it wrong again. He had idealistic beliefs.
He was
had
naive.
Naive. That's an excellent word for it. Naive. He had dreams of fancy and this and that, and reality slowly corrupted him, and it made him into a monster of sorts, because he tried. I get it's kind of a phrase I'm reading. You can't ride the wind. You can't ride the whirlwind out there. You can't tame it. It's an uncontrollable beast, and he tried to tame it, and look what it got him. He lost his innocence. There was some kind of innocence to Lawrence when the movie starts. Painting a we first are introduced him. He's painting a map, nice little detailed map, taking his time, very happy. And then he willingly throws himself into the harsh realities of a very bloody war, and his delusions of grandeur eventually sweep him away, and he believes his own. It's a cautionary tale, and history always has these things. Do not get caught up in your own mythology. He got caught up in his own mythology.
Mhm.
And yes, was he rewarded in the end? He gets raised up to colonel, full bird colonel, I would assume. And he gets to essentially retire back to England, seen as a hero by his compatriots. But everybody knows at this point, because now we go back to the famous to one of the famous lines, but the line I said where Faisal was talking with Allenby and everybody there in Dryden and says, we all know that Lawrence, he's a double-edged blade. We like to wield him, but he will come back and attack us. So I think it's best to put him out to pasture now.
Mhm.
And of course, Faisal, a very shrewd man, understands that Lawrence is broken. He's a broken individual, and he's not even useful anymore. He's not even a useful tool. And they send him on his way. And I like the final moment when Lawrence is being driven away out of like, where are they in the end? I guess they're in Damascus still. They're in Damascus.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And he's being driven, and he sees a bunch of Bedouins, on their camels marching along. And he raises up to see if he recognizes any of them. And at the same time, this is symmetry. I love symmetry. The motorcycle cuts them off.
Hmm.
It's like, there you go. I love that kind of thing. Because a motorcycle ends up being his death. And there it is. There it is. I mean, we there could be so much more to talk about this movie, but we don't want to. With only two of us here, there's only so much Jed and I can ramble on about without different points
It's
of view.
such a
Yeah.
deep film that you have to watch
Yeah.
it for yourself. There's just
Yeah.
it's meaty and
Yeah,
runtime if nothing else.
3 hours, 34 minutes. It's got an intermission. I mean, it's got an intermission. And everybody, the cast is magnificent. The cast is magnificent. The soundtrack is famous. The cinematography is glorious. It's a beautiful movie to look at. The performances are outstanding. I have very few criticisms of this movie. I mean, it's just, as I said, you're right. There are moments where they do drag on,
Mhm.
obviously, but it was the era. It was the era. It's how they did films back then. But I don't really have much complaints. I mean, I enjoy this movie every time I watch it. It's history, and I love history. I do
Mhm.
love history so much. And yes, of course, there's embellishment, but
Yeah.
it's a movie. It's cinema. It's supposed to have a little art to it so that we can get invested, and we are invested. I never get bored with this movie. Never get bored. So that's it. Jay, you have any closing thoughts on it?
Well, I do think there are a few minor things like the motorcycle crash, like his heel turn in the conversation with Allenby at the beginning of the third act. I do think those are genuine issues. And like you said, it's kind of hard to judge it on the bloated fluff of some of it. Like all the scenes add up to something. Like the scenes are of value, but I think there are some like
Yeah.
landscape shots or whatever that are dragged out a little longer than we're accustomed to. But it is difficult to have that sort of critique because that would have been seen as a good and normal thing of the era. So I feel like I kind of have to disassociate that from my evaluation, but I do feel like this movie could work just as well, if not better, with a good
Maybe
20-30 minutes cut
30
off.
minutes. It could shift because this movie is designed to be artistic.
Mhm.
It's design. It's design. You're supposed to get swept up in it. You're supposed to feel the grandiose nature of it, and I don't, and I understand it, and I appreciate it, but I do agree. It You could trim it down here and there, but here's the thing: it's a movie where every scene has a purpose.
Yep.
There's
Which
no
is more than you can say about modern stuff. Like
Yes.
I hate to call it even fluff because of that. It has a point. It is just a long runtime.
It's art. It really is
Yeah.
art, and that's why I'm loath to say it's too long, but it's meant to feel like that. I think it's meant to understand the vastness of the desert when they're going through it, to get that soundtrack in there. It has an overture, it has an intermission, it has an outro, it has all that stuff because it was an experience, and it was meant to be experienced. And of course, when you have a stellar cast like this, you let these men perform their art, and I enjoy it every time I watch it. I do not regret it. It's always a fantastic movie to watch. And that's why I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 because this is truly one of those true great movies of all time, and everybody should watch it at least once to watch fantastic actors, a snapshot of history, and enjoy just an outstanding performance. So, Jed, what's your score for this week?
Well, I agree 100% with everything you said, and I think there are some minor things like I mentioned previously, but this film is incredibly influential and pivotal to what filmmaking is even today. Like even in films, I can see the musical motifs. We didn't really talk about the music that much, but there are motifs that I can harken back to this film. There are styles. There are so much of what we see as filmmaking derived from this film. I think it's one of the most influential films on the industry of filmmaking. Maybe not the most influential on society or culture or anything, but it definitely defined what filmmaking is as an art form. And that type of art, referencing this film back as something extraordinary, has lasted for this long. Everyone does need to watch this at least once. It's one of those films that, yeah, you might be bored going into it if you don't know what to expect or you're not invested in the history or anything like that, but it's a film that everyone needs to see because it makes you understand why films are the way they are even today. So I have to give this a 9.5, a rare instance where I rate it a little bit higher. This is as close, very, very close to a perfect film, at least to me. I do have some subjective things, like I mentioned. It does drag out, so I do get bored. I do admit I myself do get bored at instances.
I was doing other things while I was watching the movie.
Yeah,
I wasn't just watching
that can help a lot. So my subjective experience isn't a 9.5, but I can see the artistry, like you said, that went into it and the defining nature of this film that really made it extraordinary.
It cleaned up at the Oscars in its time. Thanks, Legatus, for that. I mean, and it deserved everything it got. I mean, it is a movie you should watch if you are a fan of cinema. This is cinema. We say movies a lot. This is cinema. This is art, and you have to experience it. You have to know the power of these performances, the power of the story it's telling, and it's just it's an experience, and it's an experience. All right, so Jed, what's on the menu for next week?
Well, I feel like it's going to be a little underwhelming compared to Lawrence of Arabia, but I thought we'd go back to the 80s for a brief moment with a film that I loved growing up. And it's not the funnest movie out there, but I think it's one of the best examples of artificial intelligence, which is very relevant today, and the psychology of it. We'll be looking at 1983's Matthew Broderick film, War Games.
Would you like to play a game? And listen, that's a movie that has a definite theme and a message. It's got a definite theme and a message, and that is a movie from the 80s that has stood the test of time for the past 40 odd years. Its messaging is still relevant today. It's an excellent movie. Matthew Broderick, Ali Sheedy, and I forget the name of the guy who's the doctor, but we'll get there. Anyway, all right. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight. If you had a good time, remember to hit that like button, subscribe to the channels. We appreciate each and every one of you. We will have more fun, more glory. Remember, we are now 3 weeks away from going on temporary hiatus because on August 31st, This Is Mordor Country returns. Rings of Power Season 2, baby. Oh, let the cringe begin then. And until then, guys, take it easy. Have a good night or day wherever you may be.